Welcome. I'm Sister Who. With me today I have Andi Hauser, and you've worked in the media a lot professionally over the last 7 years?
Over the last 7 years, hard to believe.
And you've been in all sorts of different contexts around the world. I think you've mentioned France, Germany, and...
Well, I went to school in Austria, so I spent a lot of time in Germany, but all my professional work has actually been here in the United States, but in a number of different parts of the country.
Okay.
Ranging from West Virginia all the way to Washington State. So got a...
But it's before your profession then where you got a glimpse at other parts of the world.
Yes, that's right. Well, it was internships abroad and studies abroad.
Where were your internships?
Internships at CBS headquarters and CNN headquarters, and they have now CNN in particular has stations in Austria and Vienna, in Munich, and then the BBC also has branches all over. So there's a lot of English-speaking news stations throughout parts of Europe and Russia even. You know, so
you made it to Russia?
No, I did not. No, but there are plenty of resources, English resources in even Russia.
Okay.
Yeah.
But by being in that situation, you got to see news feeds from all these different places.
Yes, many times. That's right. And
it must have been perplexing to compare one style and another.
The styles are very different when you talk about European news combined with the news here in the United States. First and foremost, what the Europeans find to be newsworthy and what the Americans find to be newsworthy sometimes are very different.
Okay.
If you take a look at, say, some of our morning shows, the big network morning shows, there is some news, but there's very little news. It's only mixed up about maybe...
What's the definition of news?
And it's different, I think, no matter who you are or where you are in the world. I think that definition of what's relevant and what affects you is different for everyone. Because there are certainly things that I consider news that I tell you right now, my mother might find like, well, that's interesting. Oh, but this is news. Varying everything from, for example, the morning show. You maybe have, like, take the NBC morning show.
Okay.
1/8 of it is real hard news. Hard news meaning what's going on in, Afghanistan, what's going on all around the world. Maybe the people that, when the big earthquake hit in China, in the Sichuan province. That is hard news.
Okay.
The other, 95% of the newscasts in the mornings are entertainment-based. Maybe editorials, opinions, fun, cooking. That's right. So
what's on sale at Macy's this week?
Hey, fall's going to be here soon, or spring's coming, so get your spring wardrobe ready. That's it, and so that gets us to that discussion of what's news. Now, when you go to Europe, you're not going to find morning shows that are quite as non-news based as what they are. People in Europe, they get up in the morning, and this is, like I said, I lived abroad on and off for quite a few years. The difference is they're more of a savvy consumer of news. They follow it closely. In fact, I can't tell you, not to say that, most Americans don't, but, our lives are different. We get up in the morning, we go to work Monday through Friday, we have very little vacation time. Let's start the day, bam, 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 bam. In Europe, they go, okay, well, let's just find out what's going on in the world. More of a genuine
So they could tell you the updates on whatever story.
They can tell you history of their country, going back to, honestly, in some cases, 2,000 years. They can, or even discuss the First Crusade, that, what was it, 1095. So
a lot of Americans don't know their history very well.
A lot of Americans don't, and so that factors in to what they consider to be interesting and newsworthy.
And also to how well they recognize the implications of what's in the news.
I think so too, because, having a good grasp of history lets you know real quick what you don't want to repeat and what you don't want to see again. And
the old saying, those who don't know the mistakes of the past are destined to repeat them?
That's right. Exactly. That, that should be printed up somewhere for everybody to see, because if you don't take your history, if that's not important when you're in school, or even as you become an adult, if you don't continue to follow and understand where we came from, then it's hard to know where we're going. That's not mine. I know that's somebody else's. I can't quote on who said that, but that is true. And In the European media, I would say that they take a much harder news approach.
Okay.
The news is not dumbed down,
Okay.
which some people could argue that it is here in the United States to some extent.
If there's a particularly difficult word or something, they just include it and expect you to go look it up.
Yeah, go look it up. That's right. And you know, I've been in media 7 years, and there's still, you know, I don't know everything. There's words that come up or issues, and you know, and I tell my friends all the time, well, let's go look it up. You know,
Which is a good habit to get into.
Let's go look it up. That's right. We'll learn something.
Which I think used to be a much more common principle here.
Right.
I remember hearing about when I was growing up how, was it Reader's Digest that always would print something about new vocabulary words or something?
They did that. They did, what was it? Poems.
Some sort of bit of literature
well.
also.
And they always did something. That's right. To kind of
Something
engage
designed to stretch your brain.
That's right.
Keep moving forward rather than coasting or dumbing down, as we say.
That's right. And that does happen quite a bit, and it seems, well, you've got, you know, a lot of forces that are dumbing news and lots of things down in particular, but it is kind of a cultural. The news is kind of meeting the social and cultural demands that we have in place here in the United States. I think if people demanded more from the news, they'd get more from it.
Which makes sense, but of course the responsibility is on the viewer to demand more.
That's right.
It seems to me, taking a bit of a broader perspective on the whole thing, that humanity is on a collision course with global community. International communication, travel, and commerce are forcing us into interactions with people who are so radically different from ourselves that if we do not begin to learn as quickly as we can their understandings, their language, their historical context, what pushes their buttons or pulls their strings, that we're going to wind up with serious misunderstandings that could result in all sorts of violence. I mean, we're on a collision course with global community. Either we can apply ourselves and make it a harmonious, collaborative, sort of mutually empowering thing, or we can wind up with all kinds of arguments and fights because we simply haven't taken the time to understand each other enough. Bringing all of that to the area of relating to the media, that means, you know, through satellite or cable TV now, people can watch the news that's being broadcast from the other side of the world.
Yes.
Part of benefiting from that, though, is to take the time to acquaint yourself with how the people there understand and put their news together, and understanding what they consider to be news that we don't, and why they consider that to be news. You know, I'm thinking, for example, of the countries that are populated by people who are strong adherents of the Islamic religion. Things that they consider news, they consider so because of its impact upon their religious practice.
That's right. Well, for example, maybe a holiday. I mean, it's a simple, easy thing. Let's just say, okay, maybe it's a holiday. So, and you're right. And we are seeing. I mean, there are
like
parts
Ramadan?
of the United States, like Ramadan, or
what's the one at Mecca? You're supposed to do every Muslim is supposed to do this once in their life. You know what I'm
talking about? I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a pilgrimage. Yeah. Right.
It's a big pilgrimage kind of thing, but it's a very elaborate, like 3-day.
At least.
Multi-day
sort of
thing.
It's a long, drawn-out
but I mean, it
experience.
Totally overshadows all of their society for the time it's happening.
That's right.
I don't think we have anything in the United States that does that. Not to the same degree.
No.
But everybody stays home on Christmas.
That's right.
But it doesn't upstage everything else in life the way that pilgrimage does.
That's right, and that's something that we certainly couldn't relate to. Most of us, the people like myself and yourself, born in the Midwest, and it's something that we can't directly relate to. But it's something that is eventually going to become the forefront. It is going to be out there. We're going to get exposed to it on some level or whether it's through TV, whether it's through a new neighbor.
Or there may be a coworker at work who
Right.
is a Muslim, who, after however many years, this year they're taking their vacation time and they're going over there and participating in that pilgrimage.
Right.
Suddenly it has this immediacy because it's somebody we know who's going to be in the midst of all that. And from the depictions of it I've seen, it can actually be a little bit dangerous at points.
It's pretty intense. That's right.
But dangerous in the sense that it's thousands upon thousands of people. And it would be very easy for a misunderstanding to start in which someone got trampled under the mob. I mean, you have to keep your wits about you from what I've understood of it. And that's just one example. There are other events and things that go on around the world that are bigger than human society.
Oh, absolutely.
The migrations of this or that bird or insect or thing. I saw a National Geographic special once where they're talking about, was it Iceland or somewhere in the far north? The particular 7 to 10 days each year when all the mosquitoes come out, I swear it was like an Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Could you imagine with just swarms of them?
It was a fog, and there was this whine in the air that it was the only sound you could hear, and it was the sound of literally millions of mosquitoes' wings.
It's a nightmare.
And they said during this time they go in their houses, they shut the doors, and they don't come out. And
I would too.
I would too.
That's frightening.
But but this is something that's just part of their annual cycle.
That's right.
But this abundance of mosquitoes attracts, thousands of migratory birds to feast on the mosquitoes. And so they're just living in the presence of this natural cycle and having to adapt to it because it's too big for them to do anything about. Or rather, it would not even be wise for them to do anything about it.
That's right.
Because it would upset the balance of all sorts of other things. And to be respectful of those sorts of things. But so we have the natural sorts of things that impose upon human life, and then we have the things that our civilizations have created, and then we have someone in a small town in someplace in the United States who gets to watch all this on the news, like watching life on another planet, I suppose. Until such time as one of their coworkers is personally involved in that.
Well, I think having worked in some really small markets. When I was first beginning in my career, you do get into those very small towns where maybe you stop by somewhere that maybe has 500 people that live in it, and they'll watch the newscast and they'll even say, well, you have too much international news on there. We want to know more about what's going on locally. Which you can see where they're coming from on that, but then on the flip side, you go, yeah, but it's a big world and this is what's going on in it, and you know what? It's not going to be that long before this big world is in your backyard, more than likely. I mean, it's going to take some time, but...
Which brings us to the point of relevancy. That this is becoming a global community, that it may become your coworker at work who's involved in this. It may affect the price of your food in the grocery store. It may affect the kind of car you drive. It may even wind up affecting the kind of energy you use, whether you continue to drive a gas-driven car or whether you buy a hybrid. Or whether you buy an electric car. Any number of developments is possible, and to the extent that you keep a finger on the pulse of the international community, these things won't be quite so surprising to you when they show up at your door. And to say that they won't show up in your door, to me is at best naive.
At best.
We're already living with things that you and I never thought we'd see.
We are, and I think you can subscribe to the school of thought. We're all citizens of the world, and I think that kind of can alleviate a lot of shock or misunderstandings, because we all want to identify with our country, and that is fabulous. But then also don't forget there's a big world out there as well, and it's okay to try and identify with that, no matter where you're living.
Well, it's like the bumper sticker: think globally but act locally.
That's a great one.
To have the awareness. To me, it's like peripheral vision. That part of our vision that, where, when can you see the finger coming around your head?
Exactly, right.
using the metaphor of vision, if you only see the details off to the sides, you have macular degeneration, and you can't see what's in front of you. If you can only see what's in front of you, you have glaucoma, tunnel vision, both of which are dysfunctions and pathological conditions. They're bad things to happen.
Right.
Healthy vision requires both, to be able to see what's going on globally, but also to be able to see and deal with what's right in front of you. And that, you know, as we move toward this global community, that's something that I think is really important for each of us. You know, to be involved in the living our own lives, to be doing what we can locally, and yet to have that broader vision, and not to get things skewed to where, you know, like I was saying, macular degeneration, where you don't see what's in front of you. I know of communities, for example, where if you confess in public that you don't recycle your plastic, you are in such trouble. But in those same communities, there are people who are homeless and jobless and dealing with all sorts of medical conditions because they can't get appropriate medical care because it's too expensive. I don't think an obsession with ecology was meant to be done at the expense of being able to see each other's faces and value each other as people. Again, it needs to be one of that both and instead of either or. It's not either local or global, it's both and. It's not either recycle or deal with people, it's both and. We need to be responsible in our relationships, and we also need to be responsible with our resources.
But they're not mutually exclusive.
Well, not mutually exclusive, but even more than not being mutually exclusive, it's imperative that we find efficient ways to deal with both, rather than to say, you know, I ran out of time and energy, I can't do it.
That's right.
The town I grew up in, for example, created a system by which they supplied, free of charge, the recycling bin, and understanding all the different reasons people wouldn't deal with recycling, because the town I grew up in was a working class town. These were not rich people who had all kinds of time on their hands. Anything on this whole list that was recyclable, just throw it in the bin, we'll deal with it.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And they made it so user-friendly that it became completely successful. And they had a recycling center right on the edge of town to deal with it all, so they didn't have to haul it 300 miles to deal with it. You know, and it became this efficient kind of go-around. I have seen other places where, you know, we recycle, but only plastics 2 and 4. You know, make sure all your cans have the lids out and the labels off, and it becomes a part-time job.
No, it's tedious at that point.
Yeah, absolutely tedious. You know, and it's, as much as I want to say yes, we need to do recycling, I would also say we need to make recycling efficient and manageable within the overall scope of our lives.
We need to do the same thing with news. Make it efficient and manageable.
Yeah.
You know.
And I suppose in that sense, having, for those who want the entertainment, putting the entertainment over there. But for those who simply don't have that much time, but they want to stay at least minimally connected,
right,
to have really concise, for lack of a better word, European-style news. I mean, I'm not trying to present Europe as the epitome of what news
That's
should
right.
be.
Because they're not. They're certainly not.
You know, it's just another method that we can consider. You know, there may be an Asian method that's even better yet. You know, we may take some from one and some from another. But to have something that works, something that's concise and quick and tells us what we need, tells us things that's going to impact our lives, without us having to do hours upon hours of homework to find it.
That's right. And do you think people innately have that thirst for that knowledge?
Only to the extent that it's presented as relevant to them. It doesn't matter to me, for example, that there was a car accident on the other side of the planet. I'm sure it was tragic.
That's right.
If there's a oil tanker that crashes and oil is spilled. It's an ecological disaster, but it also means start saving your money because gas prices are going to go up next month. Things like that.
That's right. Or if there's exactly like a fire at a refinery, or a broken, oil main. Exactly. You can all things like that.
Or blight on a particular crop.
That's right.
Don't expect affordable potatoes for a while or something.
And oranges, forget about oranges for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which on one hand, I don't want to be devaluing the things that are not relevant to us, but I also want to keep things manageable because we're living in an age of information overload. And so far, I don't see too many people, too many organizations or governments responding to the information overload. That it's simply more than we can absorb.
That's right, and it's up to us to try and filter it out, I suppose. But what you were just discussing is a challenge that every news producer across America will make the argument that you just made. How do I make it relevant but not overwhelming? And how do I make sure that this farmer in Iowa has the information that he needs to know whether or not how well his corn's going to sell or soybeans are going to sell this year. Plus, I need to make sure that I get that fight over in Palestine. I mean, it's just how do you make it work? How do you mesh it together and package it with a nice little bow and hand it to your viewer?
And I'm not going to suggest that we'll answer that question in this little bitty half-hour show.
No, that's right. But we can talk about it all we want.
We can talk about it. By its nature, television needs to remain visually interesting and engaging. If it begins to look too much like a home movie, quality is going down, and we're sacrificing the ability to engage the audience.
Absolutely, and that's an argument that a lot of reporters in the industry are making to, the ones holding all the dollars, the station managers and, the station CEOs is going, hey, this is going to kill the quality of our product. This is what people like to watch, those engaging, sometimes fun stories and all the fun show and tell stand-ups you can do when you have a cameraman. Could you imagine doing the Sister Who show without a cameraman?
We could make an attempt, but, at the moment, we're even operating with somewhat limited equipment and facilities for this show, but in the past there were times, and I hope there will be in the future also, where I can get back to a 3-camera studio shoot, because the things you can do in terms of the continuous audio track while you're switching from camera to camera, or, for example, on the news, the person who talks about the weather, and they fade to a shot of the weather outside, or they fade to a shot of a weather map, and then fade back to the person talking, and it becomes a integrated visual presentation that's more multidimensional and therefore more interesting.
Exactly.
And if many stations are cutting back and trying to make one person do the job of two, whoever's still managing to do the 3-camera shoot or whatever, or the photographer and the interviewer, whatever arrangement, is going to be the one everyone watches.
That's right. That's right. So ultimately, everybody's either going to have to go that route and save the bottom, the line, the dollar, that be the focus, or eventually they'll come back around and realize that yes, 2 heads are better than 1. It's just right now for a lot of employers, they're going, well, 1 head's better than 2 because they're watching that bottom line because those advertising dollars just aren't there right now.
Well, and the other thing to keep in mind is the skill set is so different.
Right.
That the skills it takes to be a good reporter are considerably different from the skills it takes to be a good cameraman.
Absolutely. Rarely do they fall into the same category. Very rarely.
Well, in the same way that I occasionally run into people who insist that artists need to be able to do marketing, and I usually shrug and say it's impossible, because the skill set to be a good artist is diametrically opposite of the skill set it takes to be a good marketing professional.
That's right.
And I would argue with anyone who insists that one person can do both to their greatest ability. And that also gets into, I suppose, a more medieval perspective of your profession being a profession, a lifelong vocation, that you wouldn't go to vocational school for 2 years back in the Middle Ages and ta-da, you're a carpenter.
That's right.
Go out and build things. you would be learning to be a better and better carpenter your entire life, so that by the time you got to, quote, retirement age, if they'd had retirement, you would be a master craftsman who could look at challenges that a novice carpenter wouldn't know how to address. You know, in the same way that a journalist who's been doing this for 20 years could walk into a situation and know what questions to ask and know how to go right to the heart of the matter and make it look so easy.
Right.
Where someone fresh out of journalism school would be stumbling all over wondering what to say.
Well, it's mastering your craft.
Mastering
and
your
that's
craft.
Right, absolutely. And you're right, you know, look at the great artworks of the world, look at like the Sistine Chapel. How many years and years that took to make as beautiful as it is.
He couldn't have done that when he was young.
Right, you couldn't say, you know, I'm going to be an artist for a while and then we'll go over here and, you know, be a blacksmith. It's right.
There's an excellence. You know, which when you have the dollar or the corporation insisting that one person is going to do the job of two, and the quality goes down, it's the striving for excellence of the profession it's like you're chopping off its fingers.
And no matter what you do.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Whether it's journalism, whether it's medical science, whatever it is, when you are cutting back to the budget, when you go to a newspaper and they're printing at third grade reading level because they want people to be able to understand it, and it's contributing to the dumbing down of the English language to where we don't have the skills to do anything of particular excellence anymore. You know, so as an employee, you come to this whole thing perhaps understanding all these ideals, and then you get the challenge of finding an employer who appreciates what you have to offer. What a nightmare. And then you have the audacity to expect that they pay you a living wage.
Right, right. Well, and I think that is a challenge, because I think right now, and this has always probably been the case, when somebody's in need of work, saying that, you know, maybe they've been unemployed for 6 months, and the first job that comes along, well, you know, it's difficult probably to go in there and say, yes, I want this job, but gosh, it seems like there's a lot of demands on the table, and that's a challenge, isn't it?